Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is retired Lieutenant General Thomas Bostick, a board advisor for HireVue. General, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Absolutely. This is a great topic, and thank you for the opportunity.
It certainly is a great topic. And let's start the conversation here. You have this unique perspective of having formerly led human resources for the Army, and now you're a board advisor for HireVue. So let's talk about those two and the comparisons there. What do you see as some of the similarities and the differences between government hiring and commercial sector hiring?
Well, I was also the head recruiter for the Army. After I finished up 15 months in Iraq, I came to Washington, D.C. We had failed the recruiting mission in 2005, and I was asked to go out and take over that mission. And it was the first time I realized how difficult it was to recruit men and women to serve in an organization. On average, we had to talk to about 150 people to bring one person into the Army. So it was tough duty for recruiters. It's equally challenging on the outside, but I think organizations like HireVue and other organizations that I work with are using the best of technology to help them in how they recruit young men and women into their organizations. I think one of the similarities that we're all facing now in a post-COVID environment is a lot of people and organizations have learned to work from home. So they can recruit from all over the country, in some cases all over the world, and still run their companies effectively. Some organizations have to rely on teamwork, hands-on activities. So those workers need to be at the organization in which they serve. But ultimately, it's going to be a combination of both. So I think we're going to see that even in government, to a lesser degree than you might see in an organization like HireVue or other private organizations. But I think we're going to see a balance in the future.
Okay, great. Well, there's one emerging trend I did want to get your thoughts on here. What we've seen in the federal space is that there has been a shift more towards skills-based evaluation and the emphasis not just being on credentials or experience or a person's resume in that hiring process. So, this is something that we've seen a lot of talk about, but not perhaps necessarily a lot of implementation on. What are some of the challenges that the government faces in trying to identify the skills and potential that are valuable for an organization and getting that skills-based hiring off the ground?
Well, it's a great question, and it's still a significant challenge, I think, both in the private sector and more importantly in government. And I'll speak first towards the Army and in the military and the challenges there, and then broaden that out to the federal government, and then talk about how that might compare and contrast in a company like HireVue and other private companies. Skills versus credentials, very important. Credentials being the degrees, the schools you've graduated from, some of the experiences that you've had, and skills, which you can actually execute on the job. If you take a look at the military, going back to my recruiting example, if you think about talking to 150 people to get one person in the military, and then one person goes to basic training and doesn't make it through basic training, you've invested a lot of time and energy and money in order to bring that person in, only to find them fail in their service to the organization. So it's really important to try to figure out the real skills that are necessary, and does that person have those skills in order to execute the job that they need? And one of the things that HireVue does in its recruiting effort is supporting companies is the gaming system. So, for example, you can play a game in order to show that you have computer skills, that you can actually write code. And you can do that before you hire somebody, go through the entire hiring process to find that they're not as good at writing as you had thought they were based on their credentials. So that's an example of both of the challenges in the private sector and the public sector, and how organizations like HireVue are trying to get after this. What I'd also say is that that many companies are starting to make the progress of using some sort of technical testing or gaming in order to address those skills. And they're also in the training of people. I'm on the board of CSX, and one of the first things they do when they hire someone is to bring them into a training center in Atlanta. And that training center in Atlanta will test all different types of skills that are necessary. And that person will know when they leave that training center, whether it's in 2 weeks, 6 weeks, or 24 weeks, whether they're qualified to go in the job. Now that sort of investment is similar to what we're seeing in the military at basic training. So if there's a way to find out whether the skills that this person has or believes they have will resonate and work in the organization that you have, then you've got the right balance. And some organizations are doing that better than others. So that's one of the ways to get after this, is trying to find out who has the skills well before you get them into either basic training or into a program like CSX has, which is the training center in Atlanta.
Okay, and to your point there that some organizations are doing this better than others, is there a federal agency that is doing this particularly well, that's headed in the right direction of doing this skills-based hiring?
Well, there's several ways to get after this. One is to know the people that you're recruiting that might already have developed those skills. HireVue does some work with another company that I'm on the board of, which is CSX Transportation, one of the largest railroad companies in the world, and does most of its work on the East Coast. 1 out of every 5 members of CSX has military experience or first responder experience. So these are individuals that CSX knows that if they recruit those individuals based on the historical evidence of performance of those individuals within CSX, they know they're going to be successful. So recruiting from a group that has proven skills, and that those skills are directly applicable to the organization you have. And as HireVue does its interview process through the video to support CSX and other companies, those are the targeted individuals that they're going after. So CSX is a good example, working with HireVue, going after people with the skills that you know will work in that organization. So I think that's one very strong method of going after it, and a good public company that or private company that has that sort of experience. Another one I'd say is Space Force. I used to know the head of HR for Space Force, and we had this discussion about how do you recruit in today's day and age. And the old method of recruiting that most of the government still uses is very challenging. It takes a long time. And in this day and age where there's a fight and a battle and a war for talent, the longer that process takes, the more frustrating that process is, the more difficult it is going to be to bring that person on. Space Force realizes, as the newest of the military branches, that it is now competing for talent, and many people are unaware of the benefits of Space Force. So Space Force doesn't want to do what the other branches of the military are doing. It wants to leap ahead in terms of how it's recruiting. So one of the things it's doing is using HireVue as it recruits officers into the Space Force, as it engages with the Air Force Academy and ROTC, and those that might be thinking about going into other branches of service will consider Space Force. And Space Force, when they think about who their competition is, they also think about, I would guess, SpaceX and NASA and other high-tech organizations that are using high-tech methods in order to bring the best talent to their organizations. We're seeing the same thing in the intel agencies, and I can't talk about the specific intel agencies, but obviously the intel agencies are very important to our national security. They need highly talented folks. They know the group of people that might work in several of those intel agencies are using HireVue and other technologies like that in order to recruit very quickly the most talented people that can be successful in their organizations.
Well, the thing about all the agencies that you just mentioned is that they have always historically been able to trade on their mission, their unique mission to get people in the door. I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I'd like to thank today's guest, retired Lieutenant General Thomas Bostick, a board advisor for HireVue. I'm your moderator, Jory Heckman, and you're listening to Federal News Network. Now, let me send you back to the studio for more on the CX Exchange.